and made the right decision. So I'm glad the president has come around to this. I think that it's just about, you know, making sure people get to be together, and two other people in a loving relationship doesn't threaten my marriage one bit.
Right. Congressman.
It's an interesting issue. It's clearly not the most important issue this campaign. Obviously, people are struggling. It's important for this society to keep a roof over their head and everything. A man and a woman. Marriage is fundamentally about the best institution to procreate and raise. Marriage is fundamentally about the best institution to procreate and raise and rear kids. I found it curious and interesting, again, though, that the president put this issue out this week. North Carolina just voted 61-39% to define marriage as between a man and a woman. I think that's 32 some states now that have done this. We're seeing a pattern here of the president, and I'd argue the Democrat Party as well, throwing up issue after issue, war on women, contraception, student loans, and now same-sex marriage, to take away from, to distract people from what people care about this year. I'm trying to find a job. I'm trying to keep my home. I'm worried about all this government debt, and I'm scared to death about what's going on in health care. You're going to see this president continue to do this, I think, throughout the campaign, not talk about those most important issues that probably Ms. Duckworth and I agree are the most important issues this campaign
And we will be talking about those issues, so rest assured this evening. But I want our viewers to understand a bit about this 8th district that these two both want to represent, because we've undergone some redistricting, right?
Yes, after the federal census, congressional districts were redrawn. Illinois lost one congressional district. So the new Northwest Suburban 8th Congressional District is a district which runs from Wheeling on the north through Elk Grove Village and Lombard in the southeast, and then to Schaumburg, Bloomingdale, Hoffman and States, and Carpentersville on the west. The census shows us it's 60% white, 22% Hispanic, 12% Asian, and 4% African American. Politically, though, in 2008, President Obama won here with 61% of the vote, but last election, Republican Senator Mark Kirk won with 51% of the vote. So, given what we know now about the district, given how, when you ran in 2010, you didn't get support from your Republican leadership, you said that your personal finances then, and personal financial issues, helped you relate better to the people of the district. Yet, in a new book by Robert Draper on the Congress, you're quoted as telling colleagues that, quote, you have a cult following, unquote. What does that mean? And is that cult in the district or what?
I actually don't remember saying that, but I'll still comment on it. One quick word on redistricting. We as a country have got to improve the way we redistrict. The parties in control of a state control the process, and too often they draw districts to favor their party. Republicans did it in Texas and North Carolina. The Democrats did it here, and they drew a district, this 8th district, to try to elect a Democrat congressperson. Look, this is a district, and Tammy knows this, that even more than the national average is struggling. This is a working class district, heavy manufacturing district, heavy small business district, and some of the neighborhoods in this district look like ghost towns because people are still hurting. When you talk about 83% of this country still believes we're in a recession, that tells you where people are. Look, Rick, I don't know about the cult following. I went there to be a very loud advocate about the problems in this country. I didn't go there to make friends among my Republican establishment, and I certainly didn't make friends among the Democrat establishment. And because I spoke that way, there have been a lot of people around the country who said, hey, I like what that guy's saying. I don't know if I'd call it a cult. If I did, I apologize.
All right. Well, one other issue that's been in the news lately, too, and we're facing this July 1st deadline for the issue of student loan interest rate increases. And so I know that, you know, everybody says they don't want those interest rates to increase. And frankly, if either one of you do want to see them increased, let us know, because that might be news. But,
okay.
but Ms. Duckworth, the real question on this seems to be, how do you pay for, what's the trade-off here to keeping those interest rates low? What mechanism would you favor?
Well, so I think that, one of the things that Joe and I agree on is the need to reduce our budget deficit. We have to reduce the debt. We just disagree on how to go about it. He wants to gut Medicare in order to give millionaires and billionaires a tax cut. He wants to get rid of what he calls free college education, a handout to students. I think we need to keep student loans down. I think we need to preserve Medicare, and we need to look at ending the Bush tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. We need to look at defense spending. There was a recent study that said that on average the Department of Defense wastes $9 million a day in improperly supervised defense contracts. We need to end subsidies for the oil and gas industries that are making record profits. We need to take a look at farm subsidies. You have these large agribusiness farms, these large chicken farms that are taking advantage of a tax subsidy that actually was meant to preserve small family-owned farms. So there's a lot of places to look. It's about where you place priorities. And my priority is to make sure that our children have an opportunity for an affordable education, that we don't gut Medicare, that we don't balance the deficit on the backs of our most vulnerable. And I think that's where the Congressman and I disagree.
Let me focus back on your issue of student loans, because I actually voted on this a week or two ago, and it wasn't a difficult vote, but it's a vote, and I voted against keeping the rate at 3.4%.
You voted to raise it.
Yes, so to let it raise, if it has to 6.8%. And this was a perfect issue that just typifies everything that's wrong in Washington. Every politician, darn near every politician, all they want to do is get reelected. And to get reelected, they keep promising people things. Again, here was this president whose numbers might be down among young Americans. So what's he going to do? He's going to try to throw a bone to young Americans. So he throws a bone, keeping the rate down, which will translate into saving only new college students next year $7 a month. $7 a month to try to get some votes to put us, those very students, Tammy and I, you two, $6 billion more in debt. The average 52 to 4% of college graduates right now can't find work or are underemployed. Everything we do short term to try to fix these problems ignores the broader climate.
So should we not try to encourage people students to go to college?
Oh gosh, yeah, Rick, and we do, and we have. And I know Rick Santorum botched this answer a couple months ago. This is a country where everybody should yearn to and have the opportunity to go to college. Absolutely. But what a lot of people don't realize is to try to pay for Obamacare a couple years ago, the federal government basically took over the student loan industry. We have tried so hard to make college tuitions affordable, so the federal government keeps subsidizing more and more and more, and college tuitions keep going up. The government involvement is distorting that market.
All right. Let me step in, and we're going to talk again about a lot of specific issues. I have another sort of philosophical question, Congressman, this for you. The Republican Party, certainly Tea Party members, believe very much so in small government and in government staying out of the lives of individual citizens. But of course, this past year, there have been a plethora of legislative efforts to require women to submit themselves to ultrasound exams if they wish to have an abortion, or the whole gay marriage issue. My question is, can you square the Tea Party and Republican Party philosophy of smaller government and stay out of people's lives with the fact that a lot of those admittedly social policies ideas seem to be going into people's bedrooms, according to a lot of folks?
Yeah, and let's make a distinction. A number of these social issues are very important to many Republicans. I'll speak for this thing called the Tea Party movement. I campaigned maybe a year and a half last year. I've been a congressman about a year and a half. I've probably been asked about contraception 3 times. I've been asked about abortion maybe 2 or 3. And now I've been asked about gay marriage once or twice. This thing called the Tea Party movement is the silent majority in this country. It's most Republicans, virtually every independent, and quietly a lot of Democrats who are concerned about 2 to 3 very important things. Government is too big. We are broke. We're spending money we don't have, and if we don't change it pretty quickly, our kids and our grandkids are going to be indentured servants. And I do want the government out of the way when it comes to me out there making money, trying to provide for our family. That's what this movement is obsessed with and focused on. On some of the social issues, Republicans and Tea Party people are all over the map.
Okay. Ms. Duckworth?
Well, you know, the congressman has said that his goal to go to Washington was to become a poster child for the Tea Party. And I think, you know, where we are right now is we do need to focus on the debt. We need to reduce taxes, and the congressman is right. You know, we need to do something. So I've made some proposals, and it's time for practical solutions. We need to talk about the fact that, you know, you have the General Electrics of the world who pay 0% in taxes, yet small businesses in my district pay their fair share. It boggles the mind that the Tea Party would be focused on some of these social issues. In fact, Congressman Walsh was the one. Congressman Walsh was the one who said that women shouldn't testify on the panel on contraception because it was a woman's issue. Well, it is. You know, and I had on my American Dream tour, I'm going out and I'm listening to the people in the district. And just Monday, this came up. And you know who brought up this issue of contraception and the attack on women and the intrusion of government into women's lives? It was a 60-year-old man, and he said, "This is ridiculous. I want my granddaughters, and I want, you know, I thought we fought this already. Why are we doing this when we have so much more important things to talk about?"
Nobody, I don't know of a soul in Washington, Republican or Democrat, that's against contraception. And again, Tammy, you misquoted me there. I said this issue's not about contraception. Nobody disagrees with contraception. And nobody's trying to prevent, Republican or Democrat, any women from accessing contraception. What people have fought for in this country is the basic freedoms in our Bill of Rights. And we will never get to a point in this country where the government can tell a religious institution to practice something that goes against their faith. That's the basic freedom. No one's got a right to contraception, but people have a right to practice their faith, and government can't interfere in that. It could be about any issue, the food you eat at a Catholic hospital, you name it. It could be about anything. That's about religious freedom.
Well, obviously, the election seems to be one that may turn on the issue of the economy. Congressman, you mentioned the issue of people concerned about jobs, and I think it's fair to say that in this climate, people are concerned about, they may be feeling a little bit better about things, perhaps, but everybody's worried about their jobs. Ms. Duckworth, what would you say that government's role is as a job creator? What is government's role in getting people employed?
So when I talk to the people in my district, and I've been out meeting with most of the mayors in the district, I've talked to business owners, they need help. And there are places that the government can be helpful. When I was at the State of Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs, we created a tax credit for businesses that hired veterans from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Desert Storm, a $600 tax credit, a thank you to the business owner who actually took a chance. And I'm proposing that, for example, we provide a tax credit to businesses that hire someone who's been unemployed for more than 6 months. That's something that government can do to help. We certainly need to take a look at making sure that we free up capital. You know, we bailed out, the taxpayers bailed out the banking industry, and yet they've been very reluctant to let capital out. I met a small businessman, a pizza owner, just on Monday, and he said he wanted to get a $20,000 loan to expand his business, but the bank said he would need $120,000 in collateral, and he has an 800+ credit rating. You know, he needs some of that capital to get flowing, so government can step in. You know, we bailed out these banks, and they're sitting on this money and not letting it out, and they're afraid that if they let it out, they're going to lose it. Well, we gave them trillions of dollars. They still haven't paid back taxpayers. Let's make sure some of that money gets going again. There's infrastructure development. The 8th Congressional District is heavily crisscrossed by road and rail. We're a commuting district. People drive into Chicago to work. We can jumpstart the economy with some infrastructure development, not just the roads themselves, but also, you know, our schools as well. And that'll get the money moving again. Then we invest in businesses, allow them to have the money so that they can expand and innovate and grow.
This is probably the clearest distinction between Tammy Duckworth and me. And just to address her question of the small businessman not being able to get a loan, I chair a subcommittee on the Small Business Committee on access to capital. We held a hearing last year, and brought in heads of community banks and asked them point blank, why aren't you lending? This is where most small businesses get their capital, and the answers were universal. Our hands are tied because of government regulations, because of Dodd-Frank. Look, by every indicator, we are worse off now than we were 3.5 years ago. By every indicator, this is the most anemic recovery we've had since the Great Depression. And don't blame, look, President Obama didn't create the mess. No one's blaming him for that. He's not the only president that's come into office with a mess on his desk. But he has a philosophy, and Tammy shares that philosophy, that government does in fact create jobs. Government does not create jobs. People in Elk Grove, businessmen in Elk Grove and Carpentersville and Elgin and Schaumburg create jobs. And what they want from their government is just basically give me the rules of the road and then get out of the way. And in Washington, Republicans and Democrats, this has probably been the most frustrating part about being in Congress last year and a half, we continue to do these temporary, short-term tax credits, extensions of the payroll tax cut for 2 months. This is the kind of stuff that drives small business crazy. They want permanent tax relief. And Tammy, I mean real permanent tax relief. Cut their taxes. Get rid of these regulations. And I'll tell you something. They are scared to death about Obamacare. I don't, Ms. Duckworth, know who you're talking to in the 8th District, because if you and I held hands and we walked around this district for an afternoon and we talked to 30 small businessmen and women, Obamacare will come up. And what always slays me is we think we know the answers in Washington. The people out here know the answers, and they're scared to death of Obamacare, and they want it repealed.
All right, we're going to talk about that specifically, but Ms. Duckworth, any response to the Congressman?
Well, you know, the Congressman has been in Congress for the last 2 years, and he has the ability, you know, to make a difference. I just haven't seen him do anything to make a difference. He is a congressman of the majority party in the House, and yet I have not seen you propose anything that actually will make it easier for businesses. I'm coming forward with a practical plan in my jobs plan for what we can do to get the economy moving again. We need an economy that will be that will reward responsibility and hard work. And I've not seen the Congressman propose anything other than to criticize the president.
Well, and I'll be really quick. In the House, we've passed 25 to 27 jobs bills. In fairness, and again, this is our government at work, we control the House. So each and every one of those jobs bills was sent over to Harry Reid in the Senate. And like career politicians on both sides of the aisle, Harry Reid has sat on him. Every single thing the House has done.
All right. Certainly, it's a point of contention for a lot of people. You mentioned health care, so let me ask you about health care. If the Supreme Court strikes down the individual mandate, right, and some expect that to happen, but it allows Congress to wrestle with the rest of the Affordable Health Care Act, would you, Congressman, work to save provisions such as the pre-existing conditions provision that prevents insurers from denying people coverage for a pre-existing condition or placing limits on catastrophic illnesses, that provision? If you would want to support those still, how would you pay for it?
Absolutely. And let me make an important point here. This is what's so unfortunate about what the president did. He comes into office, it's like the house is burning down, and he and Nancy Pelosi are hell-bent on imposing this huge health care monstrosity on top of us instead of focusing on the economy. If he had been smart, he would have done, Paul, as you say, he would have put Republicans and Democrats together, because there are 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 simple, smaller reforms that both sides would have come together on. The Supreme Court had better overturn that mandate. I mean, we don't live in a country where, because we breathe, our government can force us to buy something. And I don't think they'll get involved. I mean, there are a lot of scenarios. I can't imagine them getting involved in the rest of the legislation. They're going to put it back on our laps. And
so how would you pay for those provisions you said you support?
Well, again, what you would do is, and you'd balance some of those provisions, you would balance with other provisions like tort reform, like health savings accounts, which there's bipartisan support for. And if you need any sort of offset, because these are the new rules of the road in Washington, and they're good ones, you pay for it in any other area. Defense, and the big one that we've got to look at is entitlement spending.
All right. Ms. Duckworth, I want you to respond to the same question, but I want to add an extra piece onto it based on what the Congressman said. Did the President make a mistake by veering pretty clearly towards health care from jobs when he first took office?
You know, I think that health care and jobs are something that both needed to be taken care of, because American businesses are in this system where they pay for their employees' health care. It makes them less competitive internationally because they're competing against businesses in other countries who don't have to pay for health care. So I think health care is important. You know, there's a lot of things about Obamacare that I do like. I do like that children with pre-existing conditions are covered. I do like that you can't charge me more just because for my health insurance, just because I'm a woman. I know that the seniors in the district like that they can't just be dropped from their health insurance with no reason. I know parents like that they can take care of their children and their health insurance until age 26.
So how would you pay for it if it gets struck down?
Absolutely. You know, so mandate or no mandate, I think that there are some things that need to be done and there's some things that we need to fix as well. There are flaws in the plan. I'll answer your question, but let me talk about the flaws in the plan. It puts a heavy burden on businesses that have high employees like restaurants. You know, if you have 50 employees, and I waitressed going through college, so I know how many employees you have to have as a restaurant. It actually puts a heavy burden on those employers. And we need to sit down and work on some of those issues. We need to place a priority on this and find money elsewhere. I've already talked about letting the Bush tax cuts expire. I've already talked about making sure that we end oil and gas subsidies. We need to end agricultural subsidies. We need to, I mean, there's money in places, you just have to look for it. You know, right now, we would get $1.6 billion back a year if we would end the mortgage deduction for vacation homes and luxury yachts. In fact, we still even give $147 million in subsidies for businesses that buy ceiling fans from China. Do the Chinese need help selling ceiling fans in this country? They don't. So we have to roll up our sleeves. Let's find some practical solutions, and let's help the people in the district who really need access to health care.
2 quick points. Tammy doesn't just support Obamacare. She said it didn't go far enough. She supports universal government-run health care. And I actually respect the fact that she states her opinion, because I think that's where this president is, and Obamacare was the first step there. Tammy, this $1.6 billion savings that you can make, that won't even pay for 1 day of what we borrow as a government.
But if you let the $1 trillion in Bush tax cuts expire, that would pay for health care.
You're talking about raising taxes on people who make $250,000 or more, which is what you'd like to do.
I am talking about raising
primarily small business owners.
I am talking about letting the Bush tax cuts expire for those who make more than $1 million, and making sure that large corporations pay their fair share. Corporations like General Electric, who pay nothing. Small businesses in the district are paying their fair share of federal taxes, and it's not fair that they're paying their fair share, yet large corporations don't. We need to make sure that there is equity.
The reason, Tammy, large corporations don't is because we have a complicated, convoluted code that only big corporations and wealthy individuals can take advantage of. But again, we talk about this thing like the Buffett rule. The magic Buffett rule that Tammy and others love to talk about, dividing us against each other. That might pay for 2 days worth of money we borrow every year in this country. You cannot come close to taxing your way into doing anything about the deficit. Tammy, you could take 100%. I know you don't want to do this. You could take 100% of what every millionaire makes, and you wouldn't put a dent in the deficit. You know, because you agree with the president who said in 2006, the drivers of the debt is health care costs for our aging population. That's it. That's the biggest piece, and that's the fastest growing piece.
So what would you do, Congressman? You've been there for 2 years. You're the incumbent congressman. All you have said, and even here today, has been criticizing the president. No. You have said, we can't do this, we can't do that, but I've not seen you propose anything.
Tammy,
where would you propose finding funds? I have put out some examples already of where we can cut in order to pay for the things that I've considered to be priorities. Those programs who are most vulnerable. We cannot balance the budget on our most vulnerable, but we certainly can look at other places. So you don't want to give millionaires and billionaires a tax cut. So where would you find the money, Congressman? You've been there for 2 years. Tell us.
Tammy, you should know. I voted for the Ryan budget.
Yes, you did.
And the Ryan budget is the only budget, and you support the president's budget. And again, let's step back for a second. Dysfunctional Washington, career politicians on both sides of the aisle who have been there too long. All they care about is getting reelected, so they don't make tough decisions. None of them say what I'm about to say. If we don't do something about Medicare within 10 years, it's gone. And for anybody, Republican or Democrat, like you, to say, don't touch it, You're ending Medicare as we know it. The Ryan plan, whether you like our reform or not, it's the only plan that offers a reform. The president puts forth a budget, Rick, that never, ever, ever, ever balances and doesn't talk about Medicare. Let's not even count the Senate. They shouldn't get paid because they haven't done a budget in 3 to 4 years. And by the way, talk about bipartisan. I got on a bill a couple weeks ago called No Budget, No Pay. You remember the House or the Senate? You don't get paid in either house unless you turn a budget into law that year. They've been there so long, they forget their basic jobs. And I'm going to go back to this, Tammy. We're beyond this game. I hope we are, and I think we are. The people are, where we try to scare seniors into saying, boy, if he touches Medicare, we're in trouble. If we don't touch Medicare, Tammy, and you know this, we're in trouble. And it's so wrong to play politics with that issue. Propose a reform. Tell the president to propose a reform.
But we're going to go to break, but take 20 seconds, and I want you to respond to that. Go ahead.
I'm glad that you brought up the Ryan budget, because if you pass a Ryan budget, it would end Medicare as we know it tomorrow, not in 10 years. It would end it. It would gut it as we know it tomorrow.
Congressman, we just want to give her a chance.
It would absolutely gut Medicare as we know it, and it was not my suggestion. The Wall Street Journal said that it would gut Medicare as we know it tomorrow, Congressman, in order to give a tax cut to millionaires and billionaires. You would completely gut Medicare. I would protect it. I would get rid of the tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires and use that money to make sure we preserve Medicare for our most vulnerable population. You're right. The seniors in my district are scared. They're scared that they're going to lose their Social Security. They're scared that they're going to lose their safety nets. And you are on the front lines giving money to people who don't need it in order to gut. I mean, why are you so obsessed with ending Medicare? You called it a Ponzi scheme. You voted 3 times to end Medicare.
Tammy, every Republican and Democrat in D.C.
The Ryan budget ends Medicare as we know it.
Every Republican and Democrat in D.C. knows it's gone in 10 years. What do you propose to do?
I propose to end the tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires in order to pay for it. Your Ryan budget ends Medicare as we know it.
Let me step in at this point. We promised no rules, and we wanted you to interact, and that's the magic of this format, to allow you to do that. But we do have to take a break. So stay with us. We'll be back with more of this discussion on a special edition of Politics Tonight after these words. Stay with us.
One of my biggest passions in life is animals. That's why I've worked with Morris Animal Foundation for over 40 years. Morris Animal Foundation is a world leader in helping animals live longer, healthier lives. Like my favorite, dogs, of course. Well, maybe kitty cats are the best. I also like horses. Some of my best friends are apes. Elephants. Elephants are so wonderful. And who wouldn't want to cuddle up with a tiger? Oh, am I kidding? I love them all. The point is, Morris Animal Foundation is giving animals a healthier tomorrow. You can too. Just show your support at morrisanimalfoundation.org. It's all about a healthier tomorrow. And at my age, I'm all about that.
To help cats, dogs, horses, and wildlife live healthier lives, visit morrisanimalfoundation.org, where we are advancing science that will create a healthier tomorrow for animals.
And welcome back to this special edition of Politics Tonight. This is a special debate between the candidates for the 8th Congressional District in Illinois, a race being watched very closely around the nation. Once again, our thanks and welcome to Joe Walsh and Tammy Duckworth. By the way, I understand you guys just met tonight for the first time here at this table, so I'm glad it could be so peaceful.
I knocked on their door a week ago.
Yes. I was listening to constituents, so I was not home.
It was, and you missed when you knocked on the door. Well, again, thanks for being here. Joining me still is Rick Pearson, the political reporter for the Chicago Tribune. Now, as I promised, we've been gathering questions from Facebook, from viewers, from your constituents, and we'll share those during this half of the debate. In fact, let's start with a Facebook question that our viewers may have just seen on the screen. It comes from Chris A. And Congressman, we'll begin with you. Chris asks, what is your biggest accomplishment to reflect upon, and is that your reason for being qualified to hold the office of Congressman?
The voters will decide if that's a reason to make me qualified. The two things I suppose I'm most proud about this first term is, one is legislative, one is not. I'll start with the legislative. The very first bill I introduced in Congress last spring was the Balanced Budget Amendment. It was an amendment to amend the Constitution to finally force Washington to not spend more than they take in every year. There are so many of us that have become convinced that the longer these people stay there, the more they keep spending our money. I introduced that bill. We got a number of co-sponsors, and it really became the driving focus in the House toward the whole debt ceiling debate. It was the big vote, cut, cap, and balance, the Balanced Budget Amendment. The thing I'm most proud of, though, and Tammy Duckworth knows this, it's tough to run for office. I ran for office as well because I wanted to be an example of the kind of representative we need. I sleep on my couch. I turn down my health benefits and my pension benefits. I made a pledge that I'd hold more town halls than any member of Congress. I believe in term limits. I introduced term limit legislation. This is what our founders envisioned. You go there for a little bit, just a little bit. You shouldn't enrich yourself, and Lord knows I haven't. I'm one of the poorest members of Congress. But you should suffer, and then you come home, and you come home as much as you can, and somebody else goes. It's important that we as a people see this kind of representative, because over the course of the last 40 or 50 years, we have developed this monster called the professional politician, which is largely responsible for where we're at today.
All right, Ms. Duckworth, again, your greatest accomplishment, and is it the reason that you are qualified to hold the office?
Well, I've lived my entire lifetime meeting my responsibilities. At 16, I actually, when my family lost everything, I was the only one who was able to get a job. So I got a job and met my responsibilities to my families. I've lived my entire adult life as a member of the military and lived up to my responsibilities to my country there. I'm very proud of the last 6 years that I've spent working for veterans, where we introduced many first-in-the-nation programs, both here in Illinois, but then also at the federal VA. I introduced a tax credit that put many veterans back to work. I've worked tirelessly on homeless veterans programs. I have been someone who has been able to pull together coalitions, bipartisan coalitions of legislators in order to pass bills. In D.C., when I ran the program for eliminating homelessness among veterans, we had to work not just with states and counties and cities, but also with churches and not-for-profit groups to make sure that we reached out and took care of our most vulnerable among our veteran population. I'm happy to put up my lifetime of service. I think that's what the people of this district needs. I do want to say something. The Congressman has actually only ever had one bill successfully leave the House. I'm glad that you're sleeping on your couch and that you are frugal. But I happen to see that as taxpayer subsidized housing. I just think that you have not actually gotten anything accomplished in Washington other than to blame the president and then to blame the speaker. And you've actually not managed to get anything done in Washington. We need some real practical solutions right now. We need some real leadership, and I'm willing to work with anybody I need to. That's been my background. That's why I hope the people of the district will elect me, because I will work as hard for them as I have my entire life.
Tammy makes a point, and it's instructive to talk about it. Look, this president was elected in 2008. Away he went, and the Democrats controlled the town, and away they went and did a number of things. Obamacare, the stimulus, tried to get cap and trade. The American people reacted. And in 2010, they called the timeout and they said, wait a minute, this sounds a little crazy. Oh my God, a $14, $15 trillion debt? We've got the government doing things it didn't used to do. And so they sent us to Washington. They, in essence, gave the Republicans the House. Why? Because they love Republicans? No. Most people out here are sick of both parties, as they should be. But they were so scared about the growth of government, so they sent us there to be a check on what the president's doing. And look, and I'm sure Tammy disagrees with me on this, the problem in Washington, I don't want to speak for you though, is not that people don't get along. Oh my God, I mean, historically people get along, and what happens? They all have the same interest in getting reelected. So what do? They keep promising things to people and promising things. And what happens after 30 or 40 or 50 years? We end up in a situation like we are now, where we're $16 trillion in debt. That's $53,000 on the head of every man, woman, and child in this country. We didn't get here because people fought. We got to this point where we're bankrupting future generations because Republicans and Democrats did get along.
But wasn't there a difference between a check and an unbalanced kind of thing on government versus a check and frankly, a deadlock?
No, you're right, Rick. But again, you got to take, look, you have to take a bit of a longer view. When I say we're $16 trillion in debt, you know, the president didn't do all that. It took us 30 to 40 years to get there. George W. Bush increased the debt $4 billion in 8 years. And if I'd have been in Congress then, I'd have fought him every step of the way. This president has increased the debt $5 trillion in 3. It's going to take some time to rewind that. And so a big part of what we were sent to Congress to do was call a timeout and stop this. Can you imagine for a minute, guys, if we had never come to Congress in 2010, nobody in this country would know what the debt ceiling is. There would never have been a debate. We would have done like Republicans and Democrats did year after year, just increase it. We would have kept increasing spending and never had these fights.
Can I, a very, very quick follow-up to that, Congressman? And that is, look, economic experts say you're never going to balance the budget with only cuts and only new revenues. Are you open to any new revenue, including the expiration of Bush tax cuts or increased taxes in any way?
And I'm not trying to give you a cute answer. I'm all about revenue. Gosh, yeah. Tammy and I have a different way on how to get revenue. I believe, and history tells me, you increase revenue when you cut taxes, when you get off of the backs of individuals and small businesses so they can grow and hire. That's how you create revenue. You create taxpayers. We have the lowest workforce participation rate since 1981. 342,000 people left, I mean, just quit. Even looking for a job in April.
Well, I want to go back to some of our Facebook questions here. And while this might be more of a state issue, this is also seems to be an issue that is happening at a lot of states. Heather F. writes and says, I'm a teacher. I will not receive Social Security. My pension is my Social Security. Any suggestions on the looming pension crisis? I've paid my fair share. The state of Illinois has not held up its end of the bargain. Should the federal government be weighing in and trying to help some of these states? We look at Illinois with the $8 billion backlog of bills and $83 billion public pension deficit.
You know, Rick, I think that the pension question is an Illinois constitutional question, but I can tell you what I can do in Washington if I were to become a member of Congress. One of the reasons that Illinois is suffering a budget crisis is the fact that the federal government is not paying what it needs to be paying towards Medicare, and Illinois is not getting reimbursed the way it should. So we need to be more responsible in looking at how we balance the budget federally, where we are going to find, as Paul, you talked about finding revenues and cuts. You know, I'm willing to do both. I talk about a tax cut.
One thing that the state of Illinois has asked for is to be able to kind of means test and change the eligibility rules for income eligibility for Medicaid. The Obama administration has not granted that waiver. Should states be able to have that flexibility? That was actually, I believe, a part of the Obama health care reform, was that they could not change their eligibility rules for health care to the poor. The state of Illinois, a Democratic governor and administration, wants to have that flexibility. Should they have that?
Before I would be willing to agree to that, I would need to make sure that was the last thing, because where I think we should be finding the revenue is to make sure that we get rid of these other taxes. There are other places to find money to fund these programs for our most vulnerable population. That's why I think we need to end subsidies to oil and gas companies. That's why we need to end subsidies to agribusinesses. That's why we need to let the Bush tax cuts expire. You know, that's $1 trillion. There is $9 million a day being wasted in the Department of Defense through improperly supervised contracts. Imagine what Illinois could do if every 50 days they got $9 million, their share of what's being wasted. So let's look at our problems, put our priorities where they are. The priorities should be to make sure that we maintain Social Security, that we keep it solvent, that we pay it back, that we don't borrow from it anymore. Our priority needs to be to preserve Medicare and not gut it in the Ryan budget, and that we need to make sure that we maintain Medicaid, but we pay for that with funding from other sources, such as trillionaires and billionaires, such as excessive defense spending.
And which you said,
I'll avoid the talking points. Just quickly to your Illinois, which you wanted to hear about the Illinois issue. Tammy, Illinois is not paying it's not that it's not paying its fair share of Medicare, it's Medicaid. And the pension question isn't constitutional. The pension question is political. We've been playing this game in Illinois, not unlike a lot of other states, where the politicians have been cutting this deal with the public union employees, all of them, and then they've been helping getting politicians elected again, and the problem has gotten out of control. You're right about giving states flexibility, and I'd go you one step further, which was part of the Ryan plan. Block grant Medicaid. Send it to the states. We've got some great governors, I'd argue, Republican and Democrat, who know best how to work with their Medicaid populations a heck of a lot better than Washington does.
All right, let me move on, and we're going to go back to Facebook, include our viewers here. Suzanne M. has a question for you, Congressman. She said, why did Congressman Walsh vote against considering renewal of the Violence Against Women Act that protects women from their abusers? It's reduced violence since its bipartisan enactment in 1994. Why oppose an effective program?
This may be the easiest question I answer all night. I haven't yet. The vote's next week.
You want to let Suzanne know how you're going to vote?
Suzanne, I don't know yet, because there are a few different variations. There's a Senate variation. There are a couple variations floating around in the House. We will have that vote next week. And Suzanne, I'll take a look at it. But again, Suzanne, I'm going to tell you, man, woman, or child, whoever you are in this country right now, the focus in this campaign is getting our Americans working again and getting this economy growing.
Ms. Duckworth, we've got a Facebook question from Monica N. And she says that you have accused Congressman Walsh of being, quote, of extremism, quote unquote. Could you please specifically enunciate which of the congressman's votes you believe are extreme and why?
Absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost, his votes 3 times for the Ryan budget are extreme, because they would gut programs. They would try to attempt to balance the budget, actually increase the budget deficit for the first several years, and would gut programs for the most vulnerable in our population. You know, the congressman has said himself he went to Washington to be a poster child for the Tea Party, to scream from the mountaintops. And there's not been a crackpot Tea Party idea that he hasn't embraced. And it's time that we need to look.
Crackpot? So
yeah, and absolutely, absolutely. Because, you know, why would you endorse giving billionaires and millionaires a tax break on the backs
of constituents in the 8th
seniors
district
and our
who are part of the Tea Party movement crackpot? Our constituents in the 8th district.
I said ideas.
Are there ideas, crackpot ideas?
I think
You're going to blanket, and no, I'm not talking about me now. I asked you about constituents in the 8th who subscribe to this thing called the Tea Party movement. Their ideas are crackpot?
I think that what you proposed at the national level is irresponsible and extremist. The Ryan budget is extremist. You know,
Tammy, that's a great thing for you and I to debate. I agree.
You want to end Medicare. You call it a Ponzi scheme.
Actually, I called Social Security debt, not Medicare. I agree with you, but I'm focused on
Social Security.
You did call. You said that they both, the health care also resembles a Ponzi scheme.
The constituents in the 8th district, many of who subscribed to some of these Tea Party philosophies that our government is too big and we're losing freedoms every day, you're calling those ideas crackpot?
I'm calling the schemes that you're coming up with in the name of the Tea Party crackpot. You're saying that we should end Medicare as we know it. Why are you so obsessed with ending Medicare as we know it?
Hey, Paul, Rick, I got to make this one point again, because Tammy keeps saying this. You may disagree with what the Ryan plan says about Medicare, but oh, holy cow, I would much rather be standing with a plan than with a president who has ignored Medicare. And I say again, Tammy, if you're going to continue down this road as the president is and say, I'm just going to ignore Medicare, you, my dear, are ending it as we know it. And that's so wrong.
Could I just, one very interesting issue in the district is immigration. It was a big issue in your race in 2006. You just were successful in putting on an amendment on one of the appropriation bills to deny funding for sanctuary cities. Ms. Duckworth, I'd like to go to you here. What do you propose for immigration? You were blasted by Peter Roskam as supporting amnesty. Very briefly, what do you support, and what would you say about Congressman Walsh's move on sanctuary cities?
You know, I support a pathway to citizenship. I think we need comprehensive immigration reform. And whatever we do, it has to be practical. You know, you can't just go out there and put 10 million people in jail. It has to be practical. It has to be fair. You cannot let people who broke the law and came here illegally go to the front of the line in front of those who are respecting the law, but it also has to be humane. We can't deny children who were brought here by their parents through no fault of their own, who want to serve in the military, who want to go to college and then become citizens, a pathway to citizenship. You're right. I was blasted on this in 2006. I've not changed my position. This is where, you know, the politically expedient thing might have been to change my position, but I believe strongly that we have to be practical, we have to be fair, and we have to be humane. And this is where we need to have courageous leadership. As for the congressman, let me finish. As for the congressman's law, all his amendment did was take away the resources that law enforcement officers need to have in Chicago in order to lock up criminals. All he's done is made the city less safe.
Let me explain my amendment. Federal law requires local law enforcement to work with the feds to support federal immigration laws. When you have cities and states, actually the entire state of Oregon, who are sanctuary cities, who openly defy working with federal government to support federal law, they should not get taxpayer money, our taxpayer money, to do that. When it comes to immigration generally, again, a fairly short answer. These are some heated, nuanced, difficult topics when it comes to illegal immigration. But one thing that's not is secure the border, period. Secure the border. Our country needs to do that first and foremost before we engage in any other aspect of illegal immigration.
I want to touch, Congressman, we'll start with you on the housing crisis. A lot of people have paid a price with regard to mortgage fraud, appraisers, sellers, buyers. A lot of people think the bankers have gotten away with something here. Do you think they have? And what would you do to address the housing crisis?
Generally, the best solution to a housing crisis is a job. The reason that we will have more foreclosures this year in our district than we did last year is because people aren't working. Government has messed up this entire mortgage industry. Do we understand and realize that right now Fannie and Freddie hold almost 90% of the mortgages in this country? How did we get to that place? We are backing that. The taxpayers are on the hook for that. We've had a policy in this country for 30 to 40 years that everyone should be in a home. And it goes to this whole notion of the American dream. We believe everybody should have the opportunity to try to own a home. But over the years, government has made it a policy to try to put everybody in a home. And what that's done is, over the years, it's put people in homes who don't necessarily belong there, and it's enabled the banks to take advantage of a lot of government policy.
Ms. Duck, with your response.
You know, Paul, I think this is a great question because what we have right now is a lot of people who cannot refinance their mortgages at a time when we actually bailed out these banks to the tune of billions of dollars, and yet they still owe the taxpayers money that they need to repay us. I think that before these banks start handing out bonus checks to their executives, they need to allow our responsible homeowners with good credit ratings to refinance their homes. You know, my next door neighbor, her house, when she bought it, it was at an elevated price. She's got a good she's got a good credit rating, but she can't refinance because she owes, you know, she doesn't own enough of the house, but the house is now worth less. Let's have these banks make them refinance these homes for the responsible homeowners who have good credit ratings. They, after all, borrowed money from the taxpayers and have not paid us back.
Let me second one quickly something that Tammy just said. I agree. There's a division in this country between big and the rest of us. And the big banks made out like bandits. We did bail them out. I lost my home 4 or 5 years ago. Nobody bailed me out, and nobody was supposed to. Community banks in this country are dying right now, small banks. And Tammy, if I'd have been in Congress, I would not have voted to bail out any of the banks. Would you have?
I think that what we need to talk about is what's happening right now. I want to know what you've done in Washington since you've been in Congress, not what you may have done or not have done. What we need to talk about right now is what can we do to make the lives of the people in this 8th Congressional District better. Many of the people in the 8th District need to refinance their mortgages, and they're not getting the opportunity to do that.
And by the way, the President has instituted 2 to 3 refinancing programs that have been dismal failures. The economy right now is tanking. Fix the economy.
All right, and with that, we've taken the opportunity. You actually can say what you'd like for the next couple of minutes, because we've reached that point where each of you will have time for a closing statement. You'll have 2 minutes to say whatever you wish to say. A coin toss was conducted prior to this debate. It was determined that Ms. Duckworth, you would be giving the first closing statement. So please go ahead.
Absolutely. You know, I've lived my entire life living up to my responsibilities and serving my nation. I would like to do that for the people of the 8th Congressional District. And bottom line, I'm not going to Washington to say yes to President Obama, but I'm not going to Washington to say no to Speaker Boehner either. You know, the people that I owe are the people of the 8th Congressional District. I call this my bonus time. I think some of you may have heard me talk about this. Fact of the matter is, I should have died in that field in Iraq. You know, I was triaged for dead. My buddies got into the rescue aircraft, and then they came back and recovered what they thought was my body and later found that I had a pulse. So every day I live up to that ethical, that moral code of this is my second chance at life. This is why I have the opportunity to be braver, to be an independent voice, and the people in the 8th District are hurting right now. They need someone who's going to work hard for them, who's going to roll up their sleeves, who's not afraid to work with whoever they need to work to. And I'm going to be that person because, frankly, the people of the district need some wins right now, and they're not getting them. All they're getting are manufactured political crises in Washington. They're getting government shutdowns. They're getting assaults on Medicare, assaults on Medicaid. You know, they're on Social Security. They're not getting the help that they need. They need to refinance their mortgages. We need an economy that's going to reward hard work and responsibility, and they're not having that right now. So I want to make sure I can get to Washington, and the voters will know every day that I get up and I look in that mirror, I look at this as my second chance to do more, to serve more, and I've lived my entire life in service to my nation, and I'm going to do that in Washington.
Thank you. Congressman Walsh.
Thank you, and thanks you too for doing this. Look, again, there's very little subtle about me. I decided to run for Congress 2 years ago because I really did believe we were losing this thing called America. I still feel like we are, and it's a shame because we're better than this. I went there, and in many ways I had no business running because I was struggling financially. But again, I wanted to be an example because we have an institution in D.C. of millionaires and billionaires, as Tammy likes to say, and we don't have real people like us. We need to change that. We have members of Congress who have been there too darn long, both Republican and Democrat. I hit typically both parties over the head because I just think you take your party affiliation this year and you throw it out the window. We are in trouble. Tammy and I might agree on this. This economy right now is in the worst shape it's been since the Great Depression. This debt we have right now is almost criminal. The issue is, what do we do about it? And there's one side that wants more government, and there's one side that wants more freedom. Tammy Duckworth and Barack Obama are going to spend the next 5 months continuing to promise people things. Student loans, help with your mortgage, you name it, war on women, all this stuff. I'll do more for you. Because they are hoping that the American people are not courageous enough and decent enough to do what's right. Right now, we're $16 trillion in debt. And I want to say this again. That's $53,000 on the head of every man, woman, and child in this country. I think we as a country are ready to grow up. And I'm going to challenge people. If you don't want to do anything about Medicare, I'm not your guy. If you're ready to do something about all these health care costs, do something, then I'm your guy. We've got 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. We better figure out a way to take care of them. If you're not serious about really dealing with our debt, then I'm not your guy. I'm not going to promise you things. I'm going to challenge us all to grow up and save this country so that our kids have a future. Thanks.
Congressman Joe Walsh, Tammy Duckworth, thank you both for allowing us to be the first debate with you, but also perhaps in the country. Rick Pearson, I imagine this is the sign of the kinds of discussions we're going to hear this election season.
Oh, and we're going to hear them. We even have states that aren't even done with their primary season yet. So, yes, we're going to be hearing this for weeks and weeks.
All right. And once again, we thank you for being with us. I thank you for watching us this evening as well. Now, if you missed any part of this debate, our candidates will be happy to know that it's going to replay this evening in its entirety at 9:30 on CLTV. It's also going to be available anytime online at cltv.com/politics tonight. So you all can have your staff watch this as well from time to time. I'm Paul Lisnick. Rick Pearson of the Chicago Tribune, thank you so much for being with me, and we appreciate your watching this very special edition of Politics Tonight. We will be back Monday night with our regular show at 6 p.m. as we are here every weeknight at 6 p.m. So always feel free to tune in to Politics Tonight on CLTV. Good night and good night.
Thanks, guys.
Good night. Thank you.